what I'm trying to do here is not just to speak from the head, but to speak from the heart. It's about spirituality. And Tino is going to share this with you, so you don't have to take any notes. What I want you to think is go from your head to your heart about this. Why are we trying to do advocacy? So my first question to you is, what do you understand by spirituality? Every person has got some form of spirituality. And my very simple idea of what it's about is, what gets you up in the morning to do what you do? What is driving you? What's your operating system? You might work out your spirituality by belonging to a church or some group or something like that. Think of maybe Mother Teresa's spirituality. Think of Donald Trump's spirituality, polar opposites. So what gets you up in the morning to do what you do? And so we're going to look at, if we can get this to work. Can you see that, Tino?
Yes.
Okay. Our fragile planet. Come on. How are we handing our planet on to our future generations? Are we holding it gently, or are we squeezing it? And that's basically what advocacy is about, the future generations. I'm going to look at 4 questions. Excuse me. First of all, sorry. Excuse me. Where are we? Then how did we get to where we are? What is possible for the future, and where do we go from here? Now, Brother Kevin, who's sitting in the background, will tell you very, very much about where we are at the moment. I'm not going to dwell on that. You know, what is the state of our planet? And that's your next session, really. I could show a few video sections on it, but I'm not going to because of time. But what are the challenges we're facing? One is the triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. The second one is the energy crisis, the future. What type of energy do we use? And what we're mostly using at the moment is fossil fuels, and that leads to planet warming, etc., etc., etc. But as a result of all those 3, number 1 and 2, there's systemic failure of our economic, political, cultural, education, and religious systems around our world of today. And what does that lead to? Social, political, economic inequality, unrest, war, refugees, migrants, pandemics, you can name it. Just look at what's going on in our world of today. But the challenge is, and that's why you're here, why you're there in your training, is how to be people of hope. How do we bring about hope? Now, hope is not just a head thing. Hope means we've got to bring about change, transformation, action. So if you look at it at the moment in our world, the social, political, and economic inequality and unrest, and just look around our world, the rise of extreme left-wing and right-wing politics, and then the gap between the rich and poor is growing. This is just a slide to show you how the world's wealth is shared 70% with 3% of the population, 23%, 14%, 77.7%, about 43%, and then the vast majority have 0.7% of the world's wealth. That's what inequality is about in our world of today. And how do we address that? So that's just a very brief thing of where we are. As I said, you would get more with Brother Kevin in the next session. What I really want to look at is what is our driving force of how we got here? How did we get to this situation in our world of today? And to do that, we have to ask some of the very deep questions. Where did everything come from? How was the world made? How was our cosmos made? And why are we here? Those big W questions. And to answer those, we look at two ways: storytelling and modern science. And each has got a role to play in our world to really understand those W questions, the big ones, the deep ones. So science and religion try to answer different questions about the origin of the earth and humankind. And in the modern world, each needs the other. Science is knowledge through the senses. They look at things, they analyze things, and they try to work out various things using various scientific instruments. They speak about the what's happening. But faith goes far deeper than that. Why? How? And very much, it's a very deep leap in the dark. It's about mystery. And a famous scientist said the following: science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. And that was Albert Einstein. And very much there's an incredible amount of scientific and religious debate going on. At the moment, there's some very, very, very good books you can read on all this. Where are we at the moment with our scientific knowledge and where we are in terms of faith and belief and all that? Excuse me. So we go back to the faith story. Stories about creation. Now, every culture and every group of people going back to their ancient times have creation stories or creation myths. And this is an imaginative story that uses symbols to speak about reality. Poetry, for example, is all that, but a reality that is beyond our understanding. So many cultures, ancient and modern, have creation myths that provide ways of thinking about the mystery of the universe and the world and our presence in it. And from the biblical perspective, the Judeo-Christian perspective, biblical cosmology, what is happening? How did it happen? And I often speak about just go outside, and if you lie on the ground on a good sunny day, you'll see the sun moving from east to west. The clouds will come and there's rain. So in ancient cultures, the only scientific instrument they really had was the naked eye. And if you were in the biblical times, you would see the sun going from east to west. So you'd think the sun was going around the earth. And then it would rain, things would grow from the earth, etc., etc. And that informed their cosmology. They're trying to understand what the world and creation was about. And the one from the Christian perspective and the Judeo perspective is the Genesis story, which you can read in the book of Genesis. And you've got day one is light, day two, the separation of waters, three, dry lands, four, the stars, the sun and the moon, life on earth, animals, man and woman, and seven, the day of rest. Excuse me. So this sequence also is found in a Babylonian creation story. And remember, the Jews were exiled to Babylon, and they brought this creation story with them also. But now, is that a scientific story, or is it a creation myth trying to bring meaning to what is happening? And I'll leave you to answer that. But what does it lead you to how we operate? Does it lead to a hierarchical order? And in Genesis 1:28, there's be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Does it lead to a hierarchical order like this, that we've got inorganic matter, then above that, animals and plants, then human beings, then the spirit world, and then God? One above the other. And even in the human being, we separate spirit, mind, and body. Did our indigenous people long before us think this way? Or how has this come about? But if you have this hierarchical order, what does that type of lead to also? And that's the challenge about it. And this is from Greek philosophy and the Jewish philosophy, etc., and coming into Western philosophy. Ideas about God, transcendence, dualism, that means separation, patriarchy, separation, fear of the other, aloneness, individual autonomy, power over, control, status, ownership, property. Just think of those words and how we're operating in our world of today. Does it come from a perspective of a hierarchical order, one better than the other? And in many cases, if you look at that word property and ownership around our world, what do our laws say? We'll come back to that a little bit later. So this is one idea that I put before you from a creation perspective. You might not have that. You might have some parts of it. Now I'm going to give another picture. Sorry, I just want to go through this slide before I do that. So modern condition has enslaved us all to various forms of tribalism around religion, ethnicity, and nationhood. We define our identity over and against everybody else. And just think what's happening in our world today around religion, ethnicity, nationhood, tribalism in a very, very broad sense. And all the trouble spots of our world is identity over and against everybody else. Very, very much so in our world of today. But we have very modern scientific instruments these days. We had the Hubble telescope launched in 1990, and now we've got the Webb telescope, which was launched in December 2021. Way out in space, looking at radiations and things like that, and looking at what our cosmos is about and trying to understand what the cosmos is about. Now, normally at this stage, I show this little movie called The Awakening Universe, which I asked you Tino asked you to look at. So at this stage, I would ask you now, has anybody got any ideas after looking at that video, what you feel, just what your feelings are? You can shout them out. If you want to. Anybody?
You're talking about the awakening universe video.
Just speak up a little bit. I can't hear you.
I feel a little small when you think about how large all of creation is.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Does anybody come to the idea of mystery? The challenge to understand 13.8 billion years, that's their estimate, since energy and matter flared forth. And we are very, very young on the earth. And we came out of matter, and matter and time are interrelated. How did consciousness come about? Science cannot answer those questions. So there's a deep, deep mystery. And I put up this slide here now called CERN, C-E-R-N. It's the French abbreviation for the European Research Institute, the European Atomic Research Institute, which is on the other side of Geneva near the Jura Mountains. You can get there by tram. It's just an incredible setup. They have, if you can see my arrow there along an LHC, there's Lake Geneva, and here is Mont Salève, and you are somewhere over here. There's an underground facility of huge electromagnets, etc., where they speed up particles going in opposite directions, protons, and they collide with one another, and they try and work out what happened near the Big Bang times. They're incredible setup. It was, I think, 75 years since the idea of it, or 70 years, and they've got a huge facility there of interactive scientific things for, a type of museum. This is part of the museum. There are 4 or 5 places where they observe reactions, etc. This is called Atlas here, this one at the bottom. Up there was my favorite space where I hiked up to next to the Buddhist monastery, and you can overlook Geneva. And CERN is on that side of it. And one of the things they come up with here is when we look out in our cosmos, 68% of that is dark energy, 27% dark matter, and what we're seeing out there is only 5%. What all that else is, they're still trying to understand. Matter and antimatter. Why is there something and why is there not anything? If you ever have time, go there. It's very, very interesting if you're interested in those things. But that's not what I want to concentrate on from this universe story. What I want to look at, what it's telling us is that there is a web of life as we know it. And we are linked to everything, as it was said out in that little movie. We are part of everything, linked to everything. And it's taken all this time for us to be here. And we break one of those strands, we affect the whole web of life. We can't act as an individual. We are linked to everything through DNA, etc. We arose from our earth. We arose from matter. Consciousness came out of matter. And if we look at it from a faith perspective, we would say, this is God operating in everything, and everything is in God. If we look at it from a faith perspective. Excuse me. So I'll leave you with that thought, the web of life. But if we look at that web of life, what type of words can we use to describe that? That when we go out and we look at a sunrise and we look at a bird chirping and we look at a beautiful flower, we experience God. There's awe, there's mystery, there's interconnectedness, it's relational, there's community, there's diversity, creative spirit, interiority, possibility, interrelatedness. You could think of many other words, I'm sure, from that story, that universe story. Now, I want you to think back on the other words that we used: separation, patriarchy, ownership, property, totally different to these words. So, this is from St. Thomas Aquinas. The universe is the first book of God's revelation. Ever before any sacred text was written, God was self-revealing through the unfolding universe story. God reveals God's self through the universe story. And a mistake in our understanding of creation will necessarily cause a mistake in our understanding of God. That's a very deep statement that, excuse me, I've had a bit of a cold, sorry. Creation is also an ongoing evolutionary process. It's still ongoing at the moment. And God's revelation through creation is a dynamic, ongoing process. Revelation never ends while time is in existence. So that's a very, very deep slide. In other words, deep thought in this slide. And it's the basis of what I'm trying to get at. That creation has not finished, it's not fixed, it's ongoing. God reveals God's self through creation, and so revelation is keeping on going. How are we part of that? And if we come to all our very big, deep theological questions, we've got to look at them through this perspective. Things are not fixed. Consciousness is still happening. Consciousness is still deepening. Okay, so we go on. Now, we come to what is the operating system of the universe, if I like to call it that way, if you look at an operating system of a computer. First of all, if you look at our universe, everything is different. Everything is unique. Just look around the room and you'll see each one of you is so different and so unique. So to be in the universe is to be different. How do we handle difference in our world of today? Not very well. Another thing is that everything has got a deep interiority. It's got deep personhood status, subjectivity, in other words. Even a flower is different from another flower. So it's got a particular type of interiority or a particular type of personhood status. We don't do this very well. We regard other things as just objects to be bought and sold. Sorry. And the third thing is everything is in relationship, communion. That is one of the most difficult things, I think. Differentiation, then subjectivity, and then how are we in relationship with everything else? First of all, with our Mother Earth, and then with all the different peoples of our world, with non-life and biological life. That is so difficult. How are we in relationship with that? We'll come back to that also. So with this in mind, what I've just brought about, why are we here? Or how did we get here? What is our worldview? I'm going to put the two polar opposites up now. Some of beliefs in our current worldview. Earth was created for us to use as we wish. There's a radical discontinuity between the human and the non-human. There's separation. We humans are the ultimate goal of creation. The earth is infinite, can support continuous economic growth. And the situation today is normal. We can keep on this path indefinitely. How do our politicians work? How are they working? Now, what we have learned, some of the implications, given our new understandings from the universe story. Sorry. Earth is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. That's a very deep statement. Do you give subjectivity to biological life, non-biological life? Or is it just an object? Earth is primary, the human is derivative. The story says, the evolutionary story, we came out of the earth. We weren't just planted on the earth. Nothing is itself without everything else. All creation is a sacrament revealing the presence of God. Now that's very theological words. All creation brings forth God's beauty and God's presence in our world of today. Life and non-life intertwine in an exquisite dance. Neither is primary nor secondary. The one cannot do without the other. We are genetically related relative to every creature who's ever lived on earth, to every creature living now. And we need to live sustainably and in harmony with Earth systems. Now, I'd like you just to think of that slide now. Go back to the indigenous people in your world, wherever they were. Think of how they operated. Were they on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side? You know, I think of my own country, South Africa, the Khoisan people. They would be totally on the right-hand side. And I'm sure if you go into your own country anywhere, you would say the indigenous people lived in harmony with our planet, etc. They were on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, I think if you look at yourself individually, you might be somewhere in the middle. Sometimes we fall back to the left and we just use things because we objectify them, and we try and live according to the ideals of the right-hand side. I want to ask now, look at some of our politicians and our world leaders. Where are they working out of? I don't want to hit America, but when President Trump came in, he said, drill, baby, drill. Yeah, left-hand side. Where are our laws? Most of our laws only give identity to the human being and to a company. That means I can sue you or sue the company. A tree hasn't got personhood status. A bird hasn't got personhood status. It's just an object that can be bought and sold. In other words, property. Now, some countries have done even more, gone further. They've given personhood status to some mountains, some animals, some rivers. Fantastic. So we've got a long way to go in terms of our laws. But I've got two words to describe the left and the right-hand side. The left-hand side is transactional, and the right-hand side is relational. So go back to those two lists of words I did, transactional and relational. How do we operate today? So I'm just going to have a quick break now. Is there anybody who would like to say something or bring up something? Just speak up loudly. Nobody? Any observation?
Brother, you made me think on the biblical verse that is written in the Genesis that God gave us power over everything. And as a human, I was, taking it like, I'm above all. I'm above all. So this slides made me realize that every creation is equal. And these two difference, transactional and relational. So when we think that we all are equal, all are the creation of God, then there is a relation between the human and the other uh, creatures. So thank you for this understanding, the worldview.
Thank you. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
When I was just following his life, I think it also goes back into, yes. When I
Who's
was following,
speaking? Sorry, just put your hand up. Oh, Nicholas, thank you.
yes. Yeah, what I'm currently saying is that when I was just following the slides and also and how you're presenting, also what came as a thought is I thought about what Thomas Berry is speaking about the connection between the spirit, the ancient human wisdom, and also the science. You know, it speaks about the connection between the three, as you've also indicated in one of the slides that there is an integration between the three, even though that at some point others will think that there's a separation between science, the spirit, and the ancient yes, human wisdom, of which is the human conscience.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas. Anybody else?
Uh, when I look at this, I guess being the only American, I need to say this. The American culture is very much transactional right now. And it would be very difficult for any one of us to be this. And I understand that I need to be countercultural. I understand that I need to do this, but how do I do this? How do I teach the right-hand side to my students? When they go home and over the dinner table, they're taught the left-hand side. I guess that's my biggest question.
That's a very, very good question, which we're going to look at now as we go on. Thank you. Sorry, your name again?
Mike from Chicago.
Okay, thank you very much. How do we do this? How do we become more relational?
Yes.
And if we're going to be advocates, how do we do that? Is it going to be just by transactional, by law as an object, or as you'll full do this, you'll do that, etc.? Or when we try and become advocates, are we going to try and become relational? And it's all about how it is to be a human being in our world of today. And when people are talking about what's happening in Gaza, and it's just ordinary people saying it's not how we should be human beings today. So how do we become advocates so that we enhance our world, non-life, non-biological life, biological life in our world, and the status of human beings, giving them personhood status? Okay, can we go on, Tino? Is Tino around?
Yes.
Okay, everybody's still all right. Not if you want to stand up for a bit, do so. Okay, thank you. So there's your question. How do we respond to what we have seen?
Mm.
So we can have this attitude, and a lot of people have this in our world. It doesn't concern me, so what? That's it. I'll just carry on with my life. Or I pick and choose what's okay for me, and I do my little bit, but for the rest, I'm not involved. It doesn't concern me. Or we try all the time to advance in our understanding the science presents us with in order to deepen our response to what lies at the heart of it. The scientists are all telling us about climate change, what is happening, etc. And how many COPs have we gone through? Brother Kevin will tell you all about that. But the political will to do what we need to do is not there. So they are picking and choosing. And in many of our world, this is what's happening. For example, I'd say that the triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, they've been working on the plastic treaty for the last 10 years, and they can't get an agreement on the wording of the plastic treaty. So it goes. The political will to do what we have to do. How do I, as an individual, do that? So let's look at this. So, what is possible for the future, and then where do we go from here? Now, you've been studying this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all 30 of them. And if you look at that, that is one way to respond. And everything in there is relational, not transactional. And if you are teachers, do your students know about these rights and how they can respond to some of them? That is a beautiful summary of what it means to be a human being in our world of today. And that went back to 1948, as you learned. Another one, you've heard about the treaty bodies and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I was a teacher for many years, being in the Christian Brothers. I wish I had known about this. The rights of the child. That again is totally relational, not transactional. Have you got this in your schools? Do the children know about this? Awareness raising is so important. So there's two things that might help a little bit. In being an advocate, what informs me to be an advocate in all this? And how do I do it in my own little way, wherever I am? Very, very two great things, those, the Universal Declaration and the rights of the child. And then in 2015, we had a very important time in terms of global action. And you've done this one. I'm sure Tino's been doing that with you, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Who has been doing it with that?
Okay, thank you, Sister Sue. What I like to think of it, this is a practical fulfillment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. No poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education. All those universal declarations of human rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, if you look at all those first five, first six, example, seven, a practical fulfillment of them, the 2030 agenda, and yet we're far from that. Do your children know about that in your schools or in your projects, etc.? And I'm sure you've seen with Sister Sue all the resources there are about the Sustainable Development Goals. Can you try and get them awareness raising in terms of doing something or advocating about something? Quality education. I mean, I just listened the other day to the Special Rapporteur on Education. I met her a few times when I was in Geneva in small little conferences on, the whole issue about education in our world today. Think of the kids in Gaza, what's happening about their poor education, and they never will recover from that. And how to train our kids or our children in our schools to be appreciative of their education and what an incredible, incredible opportunity they've got. And moreover, think of this as a career opportunity, that if they leave the school or wherever, they must become the best lawyer possible to try and fulfill these sustainable development goals. The best engineer, the best scientist, the best politician to make these things happen as a career, not just to make money, but to look at all these issues. So you've got what it means to be a human being, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Children's Act, how to look after kids, and now you've got practical examples of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is all the right-hand side of that columns I showed you, relational. Okay, is that okay with everybody so far? Okay, well done. But it's got to go deeper than that, because there is also meant to be a spirituality driving what you do. You don't just become a good engineer just to fix a water pipe. Why are you doing that? Those big W questions. Go deeper into it. Why? And get your children in school, your people in your projects, keep on asking the why questions. And this is Pope Francis in 2015 when he did his encyclical on Laudato Si, and Brother Kevin will speak much more on that. The spirituality driving us to do this. When we can see God reflected in all that exists, our hearts are moved to praise the Lord for all his creatures and to worship in union with them. And you don't have to belong to a formal religion to do all that. But there's got to be some deep, deep type of spirituality driving you to do all this. And if you can get wherever we are in school or in a project, our participants to try and think of these things. You go out in the morning and you're in a very beautiful area and you look at the sun and maybe you see the snow-capped peaks of Mont Blanc in the distance. Wow, just beautiful. And in all our areas, we can see that wherever we are. This one is also in Laudato Si, the universe unfolds. There's that word, it's still unfolding in God who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. And Pope Francis kept on saying that. Look at the person you're dealing with. Look at the wonder that we are dealing with. And we can start just practicing that and helping our students or people in our projects just to think of things like this. It deepens our spirituality. But Pope Francis was very important in his Laudato Si that we've got to employ an integral ecology, that takes us to the heart of what it is to be a human being. And there are three things: science, ethics, spirituality, action. And he linked the four of them like this. See scientifically. What are the scientists telling us in terms of climate change, in terms of everything, when we burn something, etc.? Our response to that has got to be ethical. You can't have any programs that might affect our like the fossil fuel crisis, bring something in that's going to affect the life of other people and our planet, etc. They've got to be ethical. And then the third thing that Francis brings in, reflect spiritually. Very often, people see scientifically and they go and act immediately without bringing ethics or spirituality into it. And Pope Francis brought that to, we haven't just got a technological problem, we've got a spiritual problem in our world of today. So if you can just remember that picture, see scientifically, evaluate ethically, reflect on it spiritually, and then action. Very, very important. And that is at the heart of what integral ecology is. I don't know if Sister Sue did this with you, but the Laudato Si action platform, Brother Kevin might do it. It's 6 things: the response to the cry of the earth, response to the cry of poor, ecological economics, adoption of simple lifestyles, ecological education, ecological spirituality, community engagement, and participatory action. There's the whole thing summarized. Right. There's a picture of where we should be going, more or less. From kingship to stewardship, but even more than stewardship, we mustn't just be good stewards, we've got to be kinship. So who's on top on the left-hand side? Shout out. It's the male. Where's the lady? There's the lady. Isn't that what patriarchy is all about? And think of your own worlds where you come from. I'm sure patriarchy is still very much in vogue in our institutions, in politics, in our religious institutions, etc., etc. But to go across to kinship, where everybody is interconnected, relating to each other, and everything, biological life, non-biological life, etc. That's very hard, not easy, but that's what we hope for and what we strive for. Okay, so far, everybody? Thumbs up or not? Okay, thank you. So, just to summarize so far, we spoke about where we are, the state of our world. How did we get there? And that is our understanding. If you're going to break that down, it's our understanding of creation. How did God bring about creation and how did it happen? Where does consciousness come from? And what does all that imply? And I gave you the two types of models, transactional, relational. And then what is possible for the future? If you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Treaty on the Rights of the Child, practical aspects of that would be the Sustainable Development Goals. The spirituality behind it would be Laudato Si and all that that contains. So the last section, and it's going to be, where do we go from here? And that's the big challenge for you. What I'm just saying there is no spirituality is valid if it is simply a personal devotion or piosity. Jesus of Nazareth would have challenged that in his world, that you go to the temple to fulfill the simple laws, etc., but it's just a devotion or piosity. Every genuine spirituality must result in action. And from my perspective and Christian perspective, God calls us to mystical activism. Now, mysticism, think about it as contemplation, that you go out and you see the wonder of our world, and that invites you to do something about preserving it or making it better, to bring beauty and healing to our world. One of the sayings I said there, from Laudato Si, if we go out, we can see the wonder of God in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a sunset, in a sunrise, in a poor person's face, in any person's face. If we can see the person in people, many people are around our world, you can think about it. Child labor, estimates of 138 million children involved in child labor, in trafficking, etc. People are objectified. Women are objectified to be bought and sold. Gender-based violence, all those things we are about. How do we train our children, our people in our schools or in our projects, ourselves, to see the person in people, what it is? It's a human being. Right, let's carry on, if we're okay. Now, this came out from an economist in 1955, after the Second World War. when, all the factories were involved in arms production, etc., etc. Many women had jobs in the factories, and it was in a war economy. Now war has stopped. How do we keep that productive economy going? And this was Victor Lebeau, who said, our enormously productive economy, this was in America, demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and the use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things to be consumed, burned up, replaced, discarded at an ever accelerating rate. And this sums up our consumer society very adequately. We go to the shopping malls and buy stuff that we don't really need, but we just buy because we get a spiritual satisfaction out of shopping. Shop till you drop. And how do we give an alternative to that is so difficult. Let's face it, if you stand back, we all are guilty, if you like to call that word guilty, of a consumerist idea or consumerist behavior. It is very difficult. And how do we move our economies from consumption to sustainable economies? A circular economy where we reuse things, etc., reduce using them and reuse and reconvert things. We can't keep on blowing up our earth and mining, etc., for certain things. It's a finite resource. To make more stuff, to throw away and pollute. Just think of that linear cycle. How do we turn it into a circular cycle of reuse, resupply, etc., etc.? So that's very difficult. And part of the Sustainable Development Goals is to bring about a circular economy, a practical thing to try and do. So in your project or in your school, let's look at how do you make it a circular supply and use system in your school, for example, etc. A big challenge. When you look at every week, how much do you put out in the throwaway bin that goes to a landfill site that pollutes? How can we make that a practical example? That's living in harmony with our planet, with what God wants us to do. There's the spirituality behind it. So I'm going to show you a little movie now. Hope it works. A lady called Julia Butterfly Hill.
I believe
Can you
that
hear that?
one of
Yes,
the
brother.
biggest examples of separation syndrome in our lives is how we have such a profound disposability consciousness in this culture. And I use the example of when you say you're going to throw something away, where's away? There's no such thing. And where away actually is social justice issues and environmental justice issues. Every plastic bag, plastic cup, plastic to-go container, that is the petroleum complex in Africa, Ecuador, Colombia, Alaska, you name it. Every paper bag, paper plate, paper napkin, that is a forest. Every thing that is called waste or disposable is the ways in which we are saying that it is acceptable to throw our planet and its people away. When I started thinking about disposability consciousness, I went and asked a lot of Native people that I know if in their original language, if they had any words for waste, disposable, or trash. And I have yet to find in any traditional language words for waste, disposable, or trash. Because all traditional knowledge knows that there's no such thing. I saw a great sign once that said it's only called waste if you're not using it properly. And we have a wasteful consciousness. We have a disposability consciousness. We've lost our connection to the sacred. And for me, disposables are one of the huge magnifiers of how we've lost our connection to the sacred. Because you don't walk up to a tree and go, wow, I wonder how many paper plates I could get out of that puppy. You know, we don't think that way, but our actions are doing that. I invite people to look at everything in their lives and look at where does waste mentality and disposability consciousness, how has it infiltrated my life? And I see it as one of the ways in which we all have internalized oppression. Because those forms of oppression are disconnect. Those forms of disconnect, they work best when they just subtly weave themselves into the fabric of our lives, where we just take it for granted that we're going to go to the coffee shop and get coffee that came from an exploited community somewhere where a forest was destroyed for a monoculture, put it in a paper cup that used to be a forest, put a plastic lid on top of it that used to be an indigenous community somewhere in a beautiful area, drink it, and then throw it away where it goes back and pollutes a nature community or a human community at the end. I am so fiercely passionate about it because I know in my heart that as long as we are trashing the planet and trashing each other, a healthy and holistic and healed world is not possible. We cannot have peace on the earth unless we also have peace with the earth. Our disposability consciousness is a weapon of mass destruction. I have walked in the clear cuts. I have been in the oil pits. I have seen the weapons of mass destruction called disposability consciousness. And if we want to heal the world, we have to begin to choose tools of mass compassion, where we are reusing everything, where we are reconnecting to riding our bike, getting out and walking, using less energy, not leaving lights on here and there and not thinking about it. When I first came to the city after coming down from the tree, I was walking around in the neighborhood one day, and I noticed all these lights on in homes that weren't people in homes where people weren't even there. And I know that it's because of that mentality that we were taught that, you know, the big scary criminals will think somebody's home if there's a light on. I'm like, if I lived in a tree for 2 years and I know nobody's home, I bet those big scary criminals know nobody's home. And I say that and I laugh because it's that fear mentality that makes us to be these wasteful consumers. And I saw that that is this disposability consciousness that we're just throwing everything away, and that we are afraid of everything, and that's manifest everywhere in our lives. I invite people to recognize the joy in simplicity, the power in simplicity. Because when people hear that I'm a joyous vegan, car-free, ride bike as often as I can, touring in a bus powered by vegetable oil, a lot of times people think, well, that must be boring. But, you know, the food must be bland. You must be really sad and upset. I'm like, do I look it? Like, it is the most joyful, life-affirming choice to let go of disposability consciousness and to reclaim every moment, every day, every choice as a step towards healing.
So there, sorry, excuse me, there is one of important sayings: there will be no peace on earth until there is peace with the earth. But we continue to blow the earth up, kill off biological life, and then make things and then dispose of them, this disposability consciousness. And she terms it a weapon of mass destruction. Gosh, those are strong words. And the challenge to live a much more simple life and a joyous life. Gosh, I think she's got something there. It's not easy to do when we've got this whole consumerist society around us. Bigger and bigger, much more wealth, but that is only for the very few who can afford it, as we saw the inequality of our world of today. And if you look at a poor kid in a refugee camp in Sudan, for example, gosh, how they survive, I just don't know. And they are affected by all this unconsumed, this incredible wealth of so very few people. So to get our participants in our schools or in our projects to understand this whole idea of disposability, we can buy something and then just throw it away. There's no such place as away. So I ask you to think of that and to respect our earth. We've come to terms with genocide, but we haven't come to terms with biocide, where we kill biological life, and geocide, where we blow up our earth, because we just regard those as objects to be bought and sold, property, not personhood status. I think of all that. So just please think of that. One of those sayings is this: it is when we look at all life and we feel that sacred connection, there's that word sacred, the spirituality, that we begin to change how we live in the world. And as a result, it will begin to change how others live in the world. This is by a pastor in America: to serve and preserve the earth. We cannot live harmlessly. To live, we must daily break the body and shed the blood of creation. Just to live, we've got to do those two things. But when we do this knowingly, skillfully, reverently, it is a sacrament. It brings about God's kingdom. When we do it ignorantly, greedily, clumsily, destructively, it is desecration. And in such desecration, we condemn ourselves to spiritual and moral loneliness and others to want. That is a very, very deep statement. If you go back to the indigenous people, how they lived, they daily broke the body and the blood of creation. But they did that so skillfully and reverently. They wouldn't destroy all the plants. They left enough for regeneration and regrowth to happen. They wouldn't kill out all the animal species in the area. They allowed regeneration, rebirth to happen. They lived in harmony with the cycles of nature. And somehow in our study, in our big cities, etc., we've got to get back to living in harmony with nature, not just in concrete jungles. Somehow or other, it's a challenge for us. There's the Sustainable Development Goals, sustainable cities, etc. But to do this from a sacramental or a spiritual point of view. Otherwise, it's a word called desecration. So, this one I do very quickly, just some ideas. To serve and preserve the earth. Now, in terms of our Catholic spirituality, to break the body and shed the blood of Christ is what our Eucharist is about. And to bring that into everyday life. How do we live this whole idea of Eucharist in our lives? It's not just a devotion when we go to church. Quality of life doesn't equal quantity of stuff. Think, reduce, reuse, recycle, and any other R's you think of. Sustainability, preservation of biodiversity, soil, water, gardening, planting trees. Social and environmental justice, advocacy, leadership. Awareness raising, education, environmental rights, law. Green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, disinvest in fossil fuels and extractive industries. Local living economies, how do we support those? How we engage with our world, join a group, involve women groups and children. All this is not just a kind of action point of view. It's deeply, deeply spiritual if we think of it. If we do this, that's how we can integrate our spirituality with what we do as an advocate, how we live our lives. So that's my challenge, to live Eucharistically each day. Now I'm going to ask, this is the challenge, and this is a few of the last things I'm going to do.
It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, "What did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew?"
And there's the challenge to all of us. What do I do when I know? And we do know. How do we do that in our own way to bring about democracy, to bring about better life on our earth, etc.? And that's the challenge of advocacy. The next one is, what is stopping us doing this when we know this? And the word is fear. And again, Julia is going to tell us this one.
When I think about how we've gotten to this place of being so separated from the earth and from each other and from our choices, it seems like there's many prongs that have gotten us to this point. I think one of the core elements, though, is actually quite simple, which is fear. And fear is simple and profound, just like love is simple and profound. And fear will drive us to make choices that our hearts don't long to make, that our spirits don't long to make. Fear will shut down the voice of the heart and spirit and collapse us into beings without meaning and without value. I see in this culture in particular, how that manifests is our addiction to comfortability. We are birthing an addict society. I went through a time in my life where I was a major drug and alcohol addict. And so I know on a very real level what addiction is. And as a society, we are being birthed into an addiction culture where you need consumerism, you need comfortability, and you go through the same withdrawals and all these same things that you go through as a drug addict or an alcoholic. And I see even the most conscious among us making the most unconscious choices out of our addiction to comfortability. I love using the example of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, because the caterpillar's got a pretty cool life, you know? It's chill, it lives on its food source, doesn't have too many threats, it's usually camouflaged so that whatever birds or things might come after it, it's slightly safe. And then it has this weird calling that defies description that says there's something more for you. And there's no rationale or reasoning. And if we are, in many ways, we are that caterpillar going, man, I don't want to leave this leaf. This is so cool. I got it made here, you know? And yet there's this deeper calling that tells the caterpillar, there's something more for you. And then the caterpillar has to trust this great unknown, this great mystery. And fear keeps us from trusting the great mystery within ourselves. For me, the divine is the great mystery, that we are all manifestations of this great mystery. I take a breath and I am amazed at the great mystery that just allowed me to breathe and everything that happens for that magic to happen. But this caterpillar follows the great mystery, and then it pulls the cocoon from within itself. It goes into its deepest depths and pulls this cocoon out and then wraps itself in it. And we are afraid of what's inside of ourselves. When something comes up that we don't like, click on the television, go out to eat, go party with friends, go shopping. whatever it is, that we don't have to take a good hard look at what's inside of ourselves. But the caterpillar knows that there's something more, even though there's no reason for it, and goes, okay, I'm going to do this work. It's uncomfortable, but I'm going to do this work. And then it wraps itself in there, and it's tight and it's dark, and there's nowhere to run, and there's no way to sidetrack itself. It's just dealing with its innermost depths. And that process liquefies it. That's not a comfortable, touchy-feely kind of thing, right? That's not like, oh, and it's all going to be better. Like, that's some hardcore work. And then there's a point, though, where that cocoon gets comfortable, too. It might be a little cramped and dark in there, and I think I see that happening in our evolution as people. It gets a little cramped and dark in there, but it's also comfortable and safe now. We've created this little world around us that we can just call ourselves enlightened and stay there, versus taking that enlightenment and having the courage to take it out into a world that's not like anything we can imagine. And the last thing that happens after the caterpillar begins to liquefy is its head pops off. And then its head absorbs into this liquid being that it's becoming. And if you take a cell from that liquid before its head pops off, it only reproduces part of a butterfly. And after its head incorporates into its entire soupy being, you can take a cell, any cell, and it creates an entire new butterfly. And then the caterpillar has to push through the barriers of comfortability again and trust that whatever's outside that space is going to be a magical world. And then it takes a moment of grace to fan its wings, and then it takes a leap. And I think that our fear consistently keeps us from that process, whether it's at the leaf stage or in the cocoon stage, or where we get out and we flap our wings and say, that edge looks a little scary, I'm just going to chill here. You know?
I think that is something we've got to reflect on, each of us, our fear of getting out there and doing something, or just to sit back and let others do it. The fear is deep in all of us, and we've got to deal with that at our own personal level. So that is the challenge. Anybody got anything to say so far? Are you all still awake?
We're thinking very deeply right now, Brother Gary.
I'll say something. I know I've personally been reflecting on how I can be a more responsible consumer. It's something I've been doing for a while now, but especially in Australia, it is expensive to shop organic, to buy natural fibers, to do slow fashion. It costs hundreds of dollars. And I think it's really important when you're talking about making the shift that it is financially viable for everyone, because it's not at the moment and it's really hard
Yeah.
to do things. But it's very interesting that, it's easier to obtain this the wealthier you are, but the wealthier ones are the ones also creating this larger problem. That's my reflection.
I think that's a very valid observation. I'm sure the people from Africa would find it much easier to go and shop at the little village market on the side of the road, where a local producer has grown something. Yeah, so it is quite difficult in a very organized Western consumer society. I agree with you. It's not easy. Anyway, we've got to keep on trying somehow or other. Anybody else so far?
Yes, I would like to say that it is so fascinating to see how you have connected advocacy to spirituality. With
Thank
every
you.
spirituality, it results in action. It's so well connected. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going into my last little section now.
When I think
Sorry. Jesus of Nazareth. If you reflect on the gospel story of how Jesus operated, he was the ultimate advocate. whoever he dealt with, met with, the woman at the well, Matthew, the tax collector, people on the edges of society. I think Brian might have done that, done that with you. He tried to bring out the person in those people. He operated at the person level to make them better. He didn't agree with what they were doing, but he challenged them to be better human beings in his world of that day. And that's how he operated. And because the law of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Romans were so prescriptive, he was actually fighting against that. And for that, he was put to death. I'm going to show you a little movie coming from The Chosen. And
Matthew. Matthew. Bye-bye. I've got it.
The opening?
Yes.
What is it?
A map.
The what?
Directions. Where people should look to find me.
Okay. Give me a moment.
there's the Beatitudes that you just listened to. And what was summarized of Jesus, if you want to find me, go to those groups. And that's what advocacy is all about. And if you listen to the reports at the Human Rights Council, in the last year, hundreds of journalists and advocates have been put to death in our world. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are you who are persecuted. So I just want to finish off with this last one. When we understand Jesus' words in Aramaic, sorry, my screen is in the way there. We translate it like this: get up, go ahead, do something, move. You are hungry and thirsty for justice, for you shall be satisfied. Get up, go ahead, do something, move, you peacemakers, for you shall be called children of God. To me, this reflects Jesus' words and teaching much more accurately. I can hear him saying, get your hands dirty to build a human society for human beings. Otherwise, others will torture and murder the poor, the voiceless, and the powerless. Christianity is not passive, but active, energetic, alive, going beyond despair. Get up, go ahead, do something, move, is what Jesus wishes to tell his disciples. And that's what advocacy is all about. So, we are all in this together, and the eyes of the future are looking back at us, and they're praying for us to see beyond our own time. And I'll leave with this kind of following statements as a reflection. The earth is primary, the human is secondary. Human rights flow out of earth rights. We need to move from anthropocentrism to cosmocentrism. We are a community of subjects, not a collection of objects. We are the universe in the form of a human being. We are the universe reflecting on itself, consciousness. Everything is in some way sacramental. Everything is sacred. Earth is a sacrament of divine glory. Only the sense of the sacred will save us. Where do we touch the sacred, and where does the sacred touch us? God calls us to mystical activism to bring beauty and healing to our world. So Tina will share all this with you, and those are very good reflection statements to think about. I end with this. There's a beautiful lady sipping a glass of wine, looking out at the ocean. A satisfied life is better than a successful life. because our success is measured by others, but our satisfaction is measured by our own soul, mind, and heart.